All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second Northeast Renewable Diesel Working Group session. Got some slides today to go through. So yes, like I said, this is our second in a four-part series of a renewable diesel working group session that we're hosting here in partnership between Maine Clean Communities and Vermont Clean Communities. I'm joined here today. For those who don't know me, my name is John Gagne. I am the Maine Clean Communities Coalition co-director and joined here by my colleague Peggy.
Hi, folks. I'm Peggy O'Neill Vivanco, the Coalition Director for Vermont Clean Communities.
Really excited to be here today. So today on our agenda, we're going to be talking about the topic of renewable diesel logistics. So we'll do a quick welcome, an overview of clean cities and communities. We'll do a quick recap of some of the things that we had talked about last session, which was sort of a renewable diesel 101 and high-level introduction to the fuel itself and some background on why we're sort of um, engaging in this work, starting to explore the fuel as a whole and why it's relevant to the Northeast specifically. Today's session will be focused all around the logistics. And so we're joined by two folks here today, which we'll introduce later down the line, folks that are really in the industry using this fuel in real time. So we'll hear a lot about some of the processes that they went through, some of the logistics, sort of the why behind the idea of exploring renewable diesel and some potential for the future moving forward. We will have time for a Q&A with the speakers following their presentations. So as each of their speakers are going through their slide decks, be sure to jot down some questions. You feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll get to them following the presentations. And then after that, we'll be moving more into a group-wide discussion. So we have some guiding questions, and this is meant to be, really intentionally a peer-to-peer sharing opportunity for folks to ask questions, hash out any concerns or unknowns that folks have around the fuel. We've got a good diversity of folks that are on this call, from fuel suppliers and providers to folks using the fuel, as well as some folks from state agencies and a wide array of folks that are joining us today. So even if nobody has an answer to your question, feel free to drop it in the chat anyway. And it's something that we will work on addressing in any future sessions. And then we'll wrap up and discuss some next steps. So part of that wrap up will include some of the key takeaways from today's sessions that we'll leave you all with. So giving a little bit of background on Clean Cities and Communities. So Clean Cities and Communities is a U.S. Department of Energy partnership to advance clean transportation nationwide. There are over 75 DOE designated Clean Cities and Communities coalitions that work locally in a variety of communities across the country, with the goal of strengthening the nation's environment, energy security, and economic prosperity. And so the region that we're primarily looking at today is the Northeast area, which we're roughly defining as a lot of our New England states as well as New York. And so the Clean Cities and Communities mission is to advance the nation's environment, energy security, and economic prosperity through collaboration with communities by building partnerships with public and private sector stakeholders that create equitable deployment of clean transportation solutions for all. We do this work typically by working directly with fleets. Oftentimes, Clean Cities and Communities coalitions are referred to the boots on the ground, folks that work directly on providing that direct technical assistance, connecting fleets and various stakeholders to unbiased, data-driven tools and resources, as well as a focus on building and strengthening partnerships in this sector. We also work to receive personalized experience rooted in local context. So that's where that boots on the ground terminology comes from. We work directly with our local communities and understand their challenges, needs, and priorities. And then another big piece that Clean Cities and Communities Coalitions can help support is accessing funding opportunities. That's always a big barrier for a lot of folks and a sort of a big question that can be a little bit challenging to navigate. So your local Clean Cities and Communities Coalition is always here to help support your needs and host events very similar to one that we're here today for. So as always, it's good to do a quick round of introductions. We don't have enough time necessarily to go through and do formal introductions on camera, but what I will ask is that folks will do a really brief introduction in the chat, just so we all have a better sense of what kind of folks are on the call today. So if folks could just drop your name, the organization that you represent, and sort of what's your why for renewable diesel. It'll give us a better sense of what kind of questions we think would be most valuable to ask and answer during these sessions, as well as a good opportunity for us to collect some of that information and better tailor the session 3 and session 4 that we'll be hosting later this year. So a lot of this work, or all of this work right now, is really being brought to you thanks to the National Renewable Energy Lab. So we're receiving funding for this partnership between Maine Clean Communities and the Vermont Clean Communities Coalitions under a program called Jumpstart Funding. And so the purpose of this funding is really to assess current and future demand for renewable diesel, consider heavy duty on and off-road applications, including agriculture, the ski industry, and every other sector that is prevalent in our New England and New York states. Determine fueling needs, capacity, training needs, cost effectiveness, assess demand, and connect stakeholders to make this work possible and to explore opportunities to really expand the market of renewable diesel into the Northeast. And so our hope here today is to really connect and focus on that connection piece, look at market development opportunities that we can really create and build momentum for through this connection, and then offer sort of a suite of fleet solutions and pathways forward for folks to continue moving this work and potentially move into an implementation phase with the fuel. So last time we met, we had talked through that renewable diesel introduction piece. Today, we're going to be talking about logistics. The next session, we'll be focusing in on the policy piece and what those major drivers could look like at the policy level. And then our final session will be really focused on implementation and taking all of the learnings from the first 3 sessions and moving them into action. Really, our objective here is to highlight the folks that are successfully utilizing this fuel, sourcing this fuel, and using it basically in everyday operations. And now I'll pass it over to my colleague, Peggy.
Thanks, John. Hi, folks. So I am just going to hit the wave tops here on renewable diesel versus biodiesel. And I know I have some EPA folks on here who might be cringing at my overly simplistic definitions, but we really want to make sure that we're going to be hitting a level set on renewable versus biodiesel. They're very different fuels. Renewable is made from fats and oils such as soybean, canola, similar to bio, but different. It's processed to be chemically the same as petroleum diesel. So it meets the ASTM D975 specifications, just like petroleum diesel. And it can be used as a replacement for petroleum diesel and blended with petroleum, right? So basically it's a drop-in fuel. However, we've heard from our fleets, they need to pilot it, they need to hear from other fleet providers, which is why we're here today. Now, a lot of folks, even in the chat, are concerned about their sustainability portfolio, reducing emissions. and so forth. So when we think about emissions, a lot of us are thinking tailpipe emissions. When we're looking at renewable diesel, we're looking at the carbon intensity, the total greenhouse gas emissions across the life cycle of a fuel from production to use. And that's where the benefits of renewable diesel lie, in that carbon intensity, that life cycle. We're also going to mention, one of our presenters is going to talk a little bit about biogenic CO2 emissions. And those are carbon dioxide emissions that are kind of related to the carbon cycle, right? So it's looking at, these are carbon emissions that result from combustion, harvest, digestion, fermentation, decomposition, or processing of biologically based materials. Renewable diesel reduces carbon intensity by about 65% compared to petroleum diesel. So again, just to reiterate, when we think about renewable diesel, we can't say, oh, it is reducing tailpipe emissions the way that an electric vehicle would. We're going back to that carbon intensity. So thanks for bearing with me, and sorry for anyone in EPA who's cringing at my description. So as John mentioned, we applied to the National Renewable Energy Lab last year. We were really interested in renewable diesel, and we have learned so much over the past year. And what we're finding out is that it is really growing in the Northeast. We're hoping that conversations like this are going to be pulling folks together. We've got the suppliers and we have the fleets, and it isn't supply and demand. We need to identify the demand for the fuel here so we can call the supply in. We're in conversations with SUNY Albany because the whole SUNY system is they're starting to pilot their renewable diesel. This just started this past June, last month and a half, to replace their petroleum fuel with renewable diesel. And then Bronco Energy is working with Massport, one of our presenters today, to fuel a greener future with renewable diesel. Again, as soon as we started discussing renewable diesel and thinking that we barely had a drop in the Northeast, we've come to find out it really is existing in a lot of spaces. Next slide. So now I'm going to introduce our two speakers. We're so grateful to both of them to join us. So first presenting will be Shailesh Gongal, who's the manager of aviation planning at Massport, and he has been prime on the renewable diesel pilot. So excited to hear what he has to say. Next up, we'll hear from Tom Bradley, the VP of Sustainability for Boyne Resorts. He's in the Intermountain West, and they have resorts here in the Northeast, in Maine and New Hampshire. So just looking for that connection of where the fuel is being used, say in Montana, British Columbia, and how to get it to their resorts in Northern New England. So Shailesh, would you like to share your deck and take us off?
Yes, thank you, Peggy and,
Thank you.
and John. Let me know what you can see. Do you see the full screen?
Full screen, you're great.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Like Peggy mentioned, my name is Shailesh Gongal. I'm manager of aviation planning here at Massport. We support 3 airports. I do a lot of work on the air side, aviation, work with FAA, and many other aspects of aviation. And the renewable diesel sort of fell into my lap because I'm also part of our net zero team. So I'll talk about that. And I'm in the title, I'm kind of leading with the idea that we're all going towards working towards net zero. And when we talk about net zero, we think about a lot of electrification and all of that. But it's not easy. So we need a smart transition strategy on the road to net zero, right? So that's why we started using renewable diesel. But before we go, just a brief background on Massport. So we own three airports, and we have maritime facilities as well as real estate. And so we have a lot of energy uses. And our previous CEO decided that we need to move aggressively uh, to combat the climate change as things are getting dire. So we need to take leadership and we need to be aggressive. And so she kind of decided that we would set a very aggressive goal of net zero by 2031, sort of to align with our 75th anniversary of the Massport institution, right? So that's how we started working towards this. And we identified five pathways to net zero: energy conservation, clean and renewable energy sources, sustainable ground transportation, and then partnership with people like you and other agencies, state agencies, federal agencies, and private partnership as well. And then just changing the culture within our organization. And today I'm going to focus on sort of the fleet decarbonization part of the equation here. So our fleet, our snow melters, and then also working towards our tenant fleet and vehicles on the airport side of the equation. So this is whenever we start out with something like this, we need to know where we are. So we started by doing an inventory of our fleet, and this is the status as of this year. This is actually last the updated in the quarter four of last year, but this is still good. So as you can see by now, 20% of our fleet are battery electric, hybrid, or plug-in hybrid, right? Uh, and although we were thinking when we started this, we're going to go all electrification, it's not as easy. We soon learned that there are vehicles in our fleet that do not have compatible electrical replacement and will not have for the foreseeable future. So we started looking at renewable diesel, right? And then we're also looking at just to keep an open mind and to have multiple strategies towards net zero. We're also looking at mobile charging solutions where we do not have enough electrical capacity to support our or chargers to support our electric fleet. So we're going in many different ways to get to net zero. And renewable diesel, we got introduced to renewable diesel around late 2024, and because it was so new, we decided that we need to test it slowly, right? Nobody's going to take something new and put it in their mission critical, super expensive, heavy duty vehicles and then take a risk and have it disrupt your operations. So we decided to test slowly, and the it was challenging in the beginning, but people were open to it because, well, it was not biodiesel, right? Biodiesel has issues. It's a drop-in fuel, uh, and you did not need to make any changes to your existing infrastructure, did not need to bring in new infrastructure, and did not need to modify your fleet in any way. So they were open to it because of that. And then there are other benefits like Peggy mentioned of using renewable diesel. But the biggest thing that people uh, were open to is because it was a drop-in fuel. So it was easy to do, right? So um, but even then, it was not easy because people were skeptical in the beginning. They didn't know what it was, and they were resistant to change. That's which is very natural. So what I did was I said, give me a list of OEMs that you work with, and I'll talk to them. So when the facilities department sent me a list, I started cold calling all of our OEMs and figuring out whether their fleet are and they support their fleet using renewable diesel. And slowly, one by one, I started getting yeses. And Cummins was really good. They came in and they reviewed all of our fleet and decided when they looked at the list of the Cummins vehicles, they said, yes, you can use renewable diesel with this. So with our maritime vehicles as well as our aviation vehicles. Then I called up Valmus in Finland, because we always talk about cold climate and what would happen to the diesel and the vehicles in the cold weather. So no, nothing better than Finland. I called Valmus, and then they introduced me to their Helsinki airport. So I called Helsinki, and then I brought together our people in a Zoom call with Helsinki, and they had been using renewable diesel for last 2 years, and they said they had no issues in the coldest of the cold, right? So after that, our facilities department was willing to try uh, renewable diesel in their snow removal vehicle. Now that is a big deal, right? But then they agreed to try it, but then we were not getting snow. So we used to joke about, hey, we need to make our own snow so that we can try our snow removal vehicles with renewable diesel. But eventually, last year we got some snow. They tried it out and they were very happy with it. And then like you guys mentioned, Brocco was a big partner. Yeah. So it's good to have a willing partner who would do anything to make it happen. So the folks at Brocco, they were like, wherever you want, we're gonna bring you renewable diesel. Uh, and so we started with 1,000 gallon small portable tanks. Um, and over a couple of months, and then we went on to other facilities, and then finally, we kind of like tested all of them, and then now we have transitioned to all of our fleet to renewable diesel. So that was how we sort of went about, but it took about a year for us to fully accept renewable diesel here. So this is the pilot that we did. Was the airside passenger bus called Co-Bus. In the beginning, I had Brocco drive all the way to Nova Scotia to test our snow melters there because they manufacture it in Nova Scotia. And these are Hanscom Airfield and uh, our Colony terminal. So now we're using it in all our fleet, right, including these heavy-duty snow removal vehicles. So this was a big win for us. And but you have to do due diligence. You have to work with your partners. You cannot force them to use renewable diesel. You have to say, let's try it out slowly and steadily, and then get their buy-in. And now we have everybody on board. Now, the landscape today is that, as everybody knows, California is the biggest user. 90% of the renewable diesel goes to California, and 50% of their, diesel fleet is renewable diesel. When we were working on our due diligence, New York went all in for their all 13,000 vehicles with 60 million gallons of renewable diesel a year. So that was a big deal. That gave me a lot of confidence that yes, if New York City is trying it out and actually going all in, kind of similar climate. So that gave me a lot of confidence to really push hard here. And then the tax credits. So I got conflicting information about tax credits, so I won't dwell a lot here. Last year, there was a dollar a gallon tax credit for blenders tax credit. But this year, Brocco tells me that it is gone away and it may or may not come back. But there we should be definitely looking at the incentives that are out there. Again, we're also working to align our sustainability goals with our Massachusetts Commonwealth goals. So we are kind of more ahead than uh, the rest of the agencies, rest of the state, but we try to align with them. And then we're also aligning with the, you know, yeah, like I said, aligning with the goals of the state and our emissions reduction goals. Um, And then Peggy mentioned about biogenic. So, and so when we account for and report our emissions, the biogenic because it is a like Peggy mentioned, it's the already available fuel source feedstock. That's above ground, and we're not taking fuel from the fossil fuel from underground. So it counts as biogenic, and it doesn't count towards your scope 1 emissions. So that's the benefit of using renewable diesel. And so what we're doing now, our next steps is we are going to do an RFP for full-scale renewable diesel because the contract with Brocco ends this November. So we'll go out and procure renewable diesel for all of our fleet at all of our facilities. So that's where we are today. Thank you.
Shailesh, thank you so much for your presentation. We're going to move on to Tom, and then we'll open it up to questions for both of you once the presentations are finished. So next up is Tom Bradley, the VP of Sustainability for Boyne Resorts.
Awesome. Thanks, Peggy. I probably should have asked this before we started, but in Zoom, do I go into presentation mode and then share? Is that the right sequence for Zoom?
I'm not Zoom expert. John Gagne, John's leading this. Give me Teams.
You should be able to share your screen and then hit it in presenter mode. And
Perfect.
yeah, that should work.
And then does that look full screen mode?
It looks black right now, but it looks like it's working. Yep,
Oh,
there we go.
there we
Thank
go.
you. Thanks.
Sweet.
That's great.
All right. Thanks for having me, and I'm excited to talk about our use of renewable diesel HVO fuels with Boyne Resorts. Shailesh, thanks. We're pretty aligned with how you went through your process and all those things, so I won't touch on a lot of that, but similar to you, we're doing it for our net zero by 2030 commitment. And a big part of our, we put a master plan together to really understand how we're going to get to net zero. And a big gap was in our heavy duty vehicles, mainly snow groomers, snow removal like yours, and not seeing a good electrification alternative in the near future. So really looking at those alternative fuels was a focus. Boyne Resorts, many might not know who we are. So this is a quick map of where we're located. So we have 10 ski resorts, 12 golf courses from British Columbia, Cypress Mountain, all the way to the northeast where we have Sugarloaf, Pleasant, Loon, and Sunday River, which I'm sure a lot of you know about. And, I'm showing this map because geographically that's been the evolution of renewable diesel in a way, where we use it in our Western resorts, and we're still looking at how to get it up into the Maine, New Hampshire region. And so I'm going to talk about our use. We've been using it for the last 3 seasons. So I'll talk about our use at Cypress Mountain, the Summit, Snoqualmie in Washington, and Big Sky, Montana, because we had a lot of lessons learned as we went through this process. And again, we're in the mountains, so we do see those cold temperatures. And again, all our vehicles we use it in are pretty critical for our operation. So we got to make sure we're comfortable with those. So Cypress Mountain, we've been using renewable diesel there for the last 3 seasons. So since winter 22 to 23, It's in North Vancouver. And so temperate in a way. We get, averages, 20 degrees Fahrenheit, but we do see pretty cold snaps as most regions do. And so we started using pilot it, which is great as a network of resorts. It's great to pilot these different initiatives and alternative fuels before we deploy them throughout the organization. So Cyprus was great for that. High quality product coming out of the British Columbia refineries. So we started with R30. Everything was successful. Moved the next season to R50 and R100. We probably went to R100 if it was available, but the availability was still kind of hit or miss. So that's the best part about drop-in fuel. Some loads would be full petroleum diesel, and we'd get availability for HVO. The next load would be HVO. So that average we had was sometimes R50, but there'd be stretches where we could use full R100. And we do all the snow removal for the provincial park into the resort. So it's about a 20-mile stretch where we're using not just our snow groomers, but also pretty big, heavy snow removal equipment. And so last year, again, we used R100 throughout the whole year. Availability was pretty consistent, which is a great spot. The team likes it there. I don't have great data on maintenance, but they're also seeing some great maintenance savings as it's a cleaning, burning fuel with a higher cetane level. So as you have these diesel filters, we're finding out we're not having to replace those as often, which I don't like to share data unless I have exact data, but anecdotally, we're seeing that that's less maintenance on those machines for their exhaust filtration systems. And so here, everything's running as planned. We know there could be a hiccup, but everything's moving forward. We're actually looking at renewable propane now at that resort because British Columbia is kind of leading the charge in a lot of these things. Big Sky. So 2 seasons ago, we moved over to Big Sky, Montana. It's in the Yellowstone region, so you do get pretty cold temperatures it's not uncommon to see really, really cold temperatures in the negative 40 degrees. So really thinking about that cloud point, gel point of the new fuel was important to us. So we did a summer through Sinclair. We got a summer blend of R99 in the fall. Everything was working great, and we had a big challenge. So we had a gelling crystallization, kind of forms of a crystalline wax is what happens when it hits that gel point. And so in the fall, and thankfully it was before ski season started, we saw a crystallization of plus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Obviously, a huge deal. Found out we were getting more of a blend that was or a renewable diesel that was refined to go to the San Diego area. So that really showed us that we have to be very, very cautious with this fuel. If it had happened in the middle of the season, that would have been a huge, huge problem. So immediately we, blended that down. We decided that season, let's just go back to petroleum diesel. And so then the next season we switched to a marathon blend, and during the season we use R20 just to be safe. And then in the summer we have a lot of construction there. We go up to the R75. And so it really made us understand that every product isn't the same. And so being very cautious and being very thoughtful of how we, when we procure HVO, we need to know when it's tested, how it's tested, and see the testing data. And a challenge here is too, right, that we were getting on-road diesel, so most of our use is off-road diesel, so having to go through that process of the taxing reasons. Costs about a dollar premium. That price has been dropping, so we're more in that. If it comparable to R100, R99 blend, we're seeing about 80-cent gallon premium there. But again, we are comfortable with that for the climate impact. And again, this is a region where a lot of the refineries in that region is going to different regions, so it's consistently staying up with supply. But a beauty of it is when supply goes down, it's a drop-in fuel, so we can go back to petroleum diesel. With this challenge that we saw at Big Sky, it's never do fool me once, fool me twice thing. So we really did a lot of research to figure out what was going on with the different refineries. And so we kind of, along with the city of Bend, Oregon, who uses it throughout their fleet, they bought a freezer that can drop down, per degree. So they do every shipment they would get, they would do testing. So we're able to use a lot of their testing on what they use. So if the testing said -10 degrees cloud point, they would actually test that themselves to be comfortable with it. And so we took a bunch of different products, whether we got testing data from the consumer or the supplier, and really understood, okay, and then also was thinking about the blend. So especially in Big Sky where we get cold temperatures, how do we blend down when we see a cold snap coming? And so kind of here is just a chart that we put together of like, okay, petroleum diesel, you get that -40, but these different products as we blend up, what does it look like? And so you could see that Nestle winter product really showed up as the best for us. Like, okay, we feel very comfortable with that product. And then it kind of went up from there. So that was really helpful for us to be comfortable going forward and not just saying, no, we're never using this again. And so then we pivoted to the next resort in the state of Washington. Again, as a ski resort goes, a little bit temperate, but they also see definitely lows. And so we see that negative Fahrenheit, -10 degrees Fahrenheit. We know that's going to happen. We know we saw the positive 10-degree gel point at positive 10 degrees Fahrenheit gel point in Big Sky. So like, okay, we're going to see that here. Let's make sure we're doing what we can to prevent anything. So here we were able to find the Nestea product, which has just been really working well. So we started using that 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago. And during that, we're watching the cold snaps. Okay, how can we predict, the weather as far we do that a lot in the ski industry, like what's it going to look like the next 2 weeks? So we saw a cold snap happening. So we started blending down to the R70 and really and we also there's two separate base areas that use different tanks. So we're able to like use petroleum diesel at one that had the winter additive and use renewable diesel at the other to really compare those next to each other. And what we found was that the renewable diesel product performed almost as well as the petroleum product, and we had no issues at all. So that's showing that testing and understanding that product is very critical to be successful. We've used over 100,000 gallons so far there at the summit, and the teams there, they talk about smell. They're like, it's exhaust smells, it doesn't smell like petroleum exhaust for obvious reasons. So team is very excited about that, and it's been a great success there. We are running into challenges with Nestea in that region now. So looking at pivoting to a different supplier, but also making sure we understand that testing. So and it's been nice. Charlize did a good job of talking about that emissions. And so Nestea put us in this pilot to do carbon accounting. And so they have this own tracker for us. So our Coleman Oil is our supplier. Every load they put in the volume that was sold to us, and then Nestea overlays their testing data for that period of supply. So I think it's every 2 weeks as they bring in barges, they're testing that product. And so they're applying that carbon emissions to that amount. And so we're able to see what our carbon reduction is. And for this case, you can see on the left side that our renewable diesel delivered that year, we've seen a 66% decrease in carbon emissions. And that is that life cycle, not just the tailpipe. And this accounts for the shipping of the renewable diesel. So if it's coming overseas, it's accounting for that fuel that's being used there. And then, so our current exploration in the Northeast, I mean, I know a few of your names that are on this call. We've talked with multiple suppliers. And so we're looking at Sugarloaf, Sunday River, and Pleasant, and Loon. That challenge of having it up into that location is where we're at. We already have suppliers there, petroleum diesel, we have haulers that work well with us. So really looking at the challenges of needing to switch haulers due to the proximity of the supply. And then again, as you go through this process, getting the operators comfortable with the new fuel. Their job is to, to groom the slopes, drive the buses, plow the snow. We don't want to compromise our operation. And the cost, seeing that dollar premium, in a way, it's like 10 cents per each 10% of RD blends. So how do you get through that when you're, a business and looking at cost of things? So another thing that we're looking at is how do you use it for our thermal use? So in our buildings where we have boilers used by fuel oil, can this be an alternative also? So yeah, that was kind of what I wanted to present on, and I'm open to any questions that anybody would have. You can stop sharing somewhere. There we go.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, great point on the thermal sector. I was just typing a question when you mentioned that. Let me start with Zach. Like I might be playing favorites here, but he's a fellow Clean Cities director from Massachusetts, and then I'll have Lorelei go through the chat to get those questions. So Zach, do you want to come off mute?
Sure, thanks, Peggy. Hi, Tom. I did have a quick question about that last part. You mentioned calculating the 66% life cycle reduction in emissions based on that work with Neste. Now, how did you calculate that, and like what kind of metrics were used? Because when we look at the numbers for like our annual reports, as an example, the EPA calculates it as a net zero and not necessarily a reduction. So where did those numbers kind of come from, and how did that work for you?
So Neste guides us. So they kind of say if we were using, so say 100,000 gallons, if we're using 100,000 gallons of diesel, petroleum diesel, this is what our emissions would be. If we're using 100,000 gallons of HVO renewable diesel, this is what those emissions would be. And that delta is the reduction. And so there it's the full life cycle of the different fuels. And so in this case, the Neste product was coming from Singapore. They would, it's be positive emissions because the shipment. So they're also taking into account if you got fuel from Washington versus fuel from Singapore, what those are emissions to transport that fuel. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Is that something where like those numbers are available that I could take a look at, or is that kind of internal to you guys specifically?
I grilled them pretty hard. And it's awesome because they're from Finland. So I bet we had 5 meetings with them to get that data, make sure it was real data. And so they have all that information. It's not necessarily something I can pull from that dashboard, but I can see if they can supply all the different calculations. They're kind of embedded in the software that produces that dashboard.
If I might add, this is Stephen Levy from Sprague and Empire Clean Cities. If you go to the Neste website, they have an emissions calculator. Might be geared more to if you were receiving product in California, but at least would give you a ballpark, but using their product. And it's very important too that Tom really hit it home that not all renewable diesel is alike. And you can have the same processor or the same manufacturer, and they can make different types of renewable diesel. Mostly where we're concerned is fleets, which, by the way, Sprague uses renewable diesel in their fleet. And just as another footnote, Port Authority of New York was the first to commit their changeover back in 2023 to all their equipment. But it's all about our winter operability as well. So if you're operating down in New Jersey or New York, it's a little different from operating like we're delivering up to SUNY Albany or coming up to Vermont or New Hampshire. So it's very important to see what those specs are and how it's going to affect you in the winter time. Keeping in mind that we use renewable diesel to try and get to that net zero and use it for sustainability reasons, but you might not be able to procure an all-around winter product for your RD. So the options are similar to what Tom gave examples of, is to either blend with the non-RD such as kerosene, or just go to your regular winter product ULSD and whatever winter product you might use, and then go back to RD in the summertime.
Thanks for jumping in, Steve, for that clarification.
All good points. They're all feedstock dependent. They're dependent on the production methods and all that. But the and there you can blend different with biofuel. There are different ways to do this. And there was a question for me I saw from Connor Smith here. So I know that Tom had to do a lot of testing, but here at Massport, the fuel that we have got didn't have any of those issues. And when I asked why that was happening, he said they've been supplying us winter grade renewable diesel throughout. So that kind of worked out for us very well. And I think there was a question about premium, which I think, Tom, you're right on the money there. $1 a gallon kind of premium in the beginning. So yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing as well.
Shalish, there was a third part to that question from Connor Smith. Did you see any maintenance cost savings for R99
Yeah.
particular filters?
That's a good question. So we haven't gone back and looked at, compare the cost savings yet, but what happened was our facilities folks did cut up some filters, like to see how it was compared to a regular diesel, and they found that it was very clean, and they were very happy with the way the engine was also performing, and they were seeing less soot come out of the tailpipe. So, but we haven't really kind of gone back and looked at the comparison of the maintenance cost, which we will be doing, because we're still new to this in a sense. We only in May we pulled the trigger for full transition to renewable diesel around end of May. So yeah.
Thank you. Lorelai, can you get any questions from the chat, please?
All right, so we have a question from Alex, who asks how many gallons per year demand for renewable diesel are potentially coming from the SUNY and Massport deals.
I can answer for Massport. Massport on our fleet, we are close to 900,000 gallons a year. But if we also combine the airline vehicles that support the aircraft operations called GSE, those tend to be about 700,000 gallons a year. So we're roughly, depending on it also depends on the winter. So could be in the range of 1.2 to 1.6 million gallons a year. And what I've learned, my understanding from the suppliers was that if you're doing a procurement through an RFP or whatever process you do, the larger volumes could get you better deals. It may or may not be true everywhere, but that's what because initially during our initial pilot, we were using very small volume. We were paying bigger premiums. But when we moved to bigger volumes starting May, we got better rates.
Thank you. I'm looking for the next question.
Looks like we have a question from Joe, who asks, are the railroads locomotives using the low carbon fuel as well, the trucking companies and the ships/tugs?
I know that Broco uses biodiesel in the supply tankers when they transport renewable diesel. Broco also has a direct link from their Haverhill facility to Louisiana, where a lot of these renewable diesels are produced by, Daimler Green, the domestic producers, the Chevron and others. So they get their renewable diesel from there as well. And also they source it from Albany. So does that answer the question? I'm not
It-
sure.
Yeah, that was me that asked that question. This is Joe Natali with Ren Star. Basically, the reason why I asked that was not particularly. I know the answer to the question was when we start capturing carbon emissions data and we start thinking about the way they do it in California, they calculate those factors as well. So if you're using a component of, hey, I used 1,000 gallons of ultra low sulfur diesel versus 1,000 gallons of R99, they also consider the transportation modes. And that is something on the Northeast as we start to mature to try to come in line with LCFSs. They're going to look at that as well. That's something we do with our carriers. We're starting to have discussions that they have to switch over if they're going to be awarded our business, is to create this fully integrated solution with lowering the carbon intensity scores. All the railroads are participating in it as a pilot program. As I said in chat, we supply the MBTA presently, and we're growing that footprint as well. So it's the entire supply chain. It's not only when that
Yeah.
spigot goes into your equipment.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I think talking about, again, the carbon intensity is, from production to combustion. Shalish, did you want to add something?
I think that's in line with what we are thinking as well. It's you gotta make the whole supply chain green as much as possible.
All right, a question for both presenters from Elise. Have you encountered any minimum requirements from your RD supplier or just premiums for ordering in smaller quantities? And how has this impacted your ordering and storage management?
So, like I said, when we were doing the initial pilots, we were paying a bigger premium because we were ordering smaller volumes. And depending on how small your volume is, they were even charging for the rental of the temporary tank, like a 500-gallon units. But if you're ordering bigger volumes, they would discount all of that. So it's basically how you negotiate with them as well. And I haven't come across a minimum requirement, but the message that I've got is because I did talk to during the due diligence phase, I talked to all of the producers, one by one, and including Neste was one of the first ones that approached us. But I also talked to World Energy, Daimler Green, Chevron, everybody. And the message I got was that the higher the volume, and and if you guarantee a certain amount, you get, and you assure them that you have that demand, that is, annually, you have a certain demand, then first of all, they would be able to secure the supply that you need. And secondly, the pricing, you negotiate better price. I have heard, and I do not know for sure, that New York City, because they order, big volumes, they got a really good deal.
I think for us, it was kind of a regional approach, a great and Big Sky, Yellowstone, Teton, Clean Cities really helped drive the demand, similar to this group is doing right now, is really engaging multiple people. A ski resort gets 5 to 10,000 gallon deliveries at a time. We don't have 100,000 gallon tanks to buy at volume, but that was driving demand there. In Washington, we just had to switch haulers that were able to access that nest stay product. So kind of unique to each region. And so I think that's a great part of this working group is really thinking through where is the demand to help drive the supply. And I think prices probably reflect, Steve with Sprague might be able to talk to that, but like, I think that would help probably.
I think so, and thanks, Tom. And it is a really great comment and question. Um, when you have a new product coming to market, it is all about demand and quantity and so on. But when you're looking at renewable diesel, it's still a boutique product here in the Northeast. Although I believe now it's about 80% of the market in California, for a couple of reasons. One is the low carbon fuel standard there, but also distribution costs are less because you're able to store it. It's a given region. When we talk about the Northeast, we're fragmented. So when Sprague began with ultra low sulfur diesel fuel, this is the 25th anniversary for that, we only had one anchor tenant, which was in New York City, the Transit Authority. And then we were able to build out to that and bring it up to Boston to the T, and then bring it to Providence for Ripter, and then into New Haven for Connecticut Transit, and so on. So you need that anchor volume. So in the Northeast today, there's some anchor volume. It's like for us, so the way we look at it, we have it up in Albany and Rensselaer, and we have it on our Bronx terminal. And what happens when we have deliveries going into out-of-line areas, where it's going to Massachusetts, New Jersey, whatever, you have that extra trucking cost. So, and as demand increases in Connecticut and Massachusetts and so on, we'll put it into our other terminals, because it's not like CNG was years ago, build it and they will come. You don't want to, you can't tie up that inventory. So as we increase inventory, more and more product will come and be more local. So now getting it to Boston, you need larger volumes for it to get into terminals to lower the price. In the meantime, it's still a boutique product that's coming from somewhere else, or maybe a smaller storage instead of a bulk storage. And also, I might also add that we were able to get it on the New York State contract. And there's even differences in pricing there. If you're taking, 8,000 gallons at a time versus taking 1,000 gallons, because it's all in the trucking. So every little bit helps.
I think that's why I think what you guys are doing, coming together, is really encouraging, and it's going to be really helpful if you guys can pull the demand together. I'm encouraged to see MBTA doing pilots with renewable diesel here, because MBTA, I think they are a huge consumer of diesel, so that'll be great.
Yes, I think I mentioned earlier, it's not supply and demand, it's the demand to call the supply. Thanks again, Steve, for jumping in. So we kind of went through all the questions. We have some a little bit more of a roundtable discussion, so I encourage anyone to kind of come off mute if you have something burning. We have a couple of points that certainly John and I have been chewing over with our staff. So just kind of throwing these out there. Talked a little bit about the storage infrastructure. Did transitioning require on-site storage? How did that transition work? Because in theory, it's a drop in fuel, but if you're really trying to pilot it, how clean in the sense of discrete fueling do you need? An independent, did you blend it? Did you just use your old tank? Did you have a dedicated tank, or did you have it trucked in? So kind of for both Shalish and for Tom to respond.
Yeah, I can take a stab at it.
Yeah.
So initially we started with separate portable, 1,000-gallon tanks. And even like at smaller airports, we use like Hanscom Field, we use 500-gallon tanks. And they were separate and they were only used on certain vehicles. But when we transitioned, so there was this question about, okay, what do we do with the the petroleum diesel that's in the existing tank? Some tanks were full, some tanks were half, some tanks were a quarter full, whatever. The vendor Brockwood decided that we could have said just blend it, because it works that way too. But they decided we can help you just do a clean a slate transition. So they pumped out the any remaining petroleum diesel from all of our tanks, and they filled it with renewable diesel. So that was what they decided to do, and it was in a way the best way to do it, because now we know all of our fleet are using renewable diesel, and so we didn't have to like wait and see, okay, it's using a blend for now and it's it's going to transition to full. So we had a clear start.
That's good.
Yeah, for us, I think, 3 years ago when we started using it at Cypress Mountain, British Columbia, like the availability was sporadic. And so that really showed that we could just do petroleum one day, HVO the next day, right? And and then it showed us if that happened at Big Sky or another resort, we were totally okay with that. So, okay, bring us R99. Oh, we don't have it. Bring us 100% petroleum diesel. Bring us R50. And it depends on the blending, is based on the hauler. Do they blend it on outside of, they blend it inside your tanks? Do they blend it in your tanks? Do they blend it in their truck? So I think every hauler is a little bit unique on how they do the blend. So. Because I think in Big Sky, they have access to our tanks, so they know when our tanks are getting to a certain level, and so they just automatically come and they monitor how much they brought up renewable diesel last time, so they can keep that blend at R20 or R50, whatever we want them to do. So.
Okay, good.
We've had a question that came up in the chat from Lou, and they're asking, what is a reasonable anchor volume to move north from Albany to the Burlington, Vermont area?
I'm wondering if that's a question better answered by Steve.
Yes.
Yeah.
So look, they're to come out of Rensselaer, which is going to come from anyway, there isn't any reasonable volume. It's just a question of what the trucking rates are. But the lowest costs are delivering a tanker load, and then the freight cost comes right after that to compute what it would, that those dollars would be. But it's all about the transportation cost at that point.
And are those tankers using RD?
Sprague uses it throughout our entire fleet. We switched over back in 2023. And we also, supply a couple of stations as well. And a lot of our customers use it out of one of our terminals too, where we have a retail pump. And if I might add too, one of the big challenges for us, and Tom, I don't know if you have, but I see what Massport hasn't been able to as yet, is there is a lot of maintenance benefits that go along with the RD, which was mentioned, and because it is so clean. So we're trying to have our customers and we're trying to document that as well, because it's a lot, especially when you're running over the road and you have a diesel particulate filter, and it needs to have regeneration, and a lot of trucks pull on the side of the road and buses to regenerate. and it takes a lot of time and effort to go do that.
I think the
So
Vancouver
we're trying.
fire department kind of did some of that analysis, right? And they're seeing like I think it was $5,000 to $10,000 in maintenance reduction per fire truck by using renewable diesel. So they spent the time to really understand, okay, we do two less I don't know the right term for regenerating diesel.
Cleanings?
Yeah, they
Diesel
did.
particulate filter cleanings.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, they have to do it two less times a year, right? So that's a dollar value and a maintenance savings value, right? So
Great.
Yeah, we'll try to quantify that in the coming months.
That's a question we get asked by a lot of our
Yeah.
municipal fleets in particular. Have either of you observed any differences in kind of vehicle performance since the switch? And there are you folks, but there are also your kind of technicians and your operators. So kind of tied to that is how easy or difficult was this transition to a new fuel? Shalish, you mentioned a little bit of getting everyone on board and dealing with any reluctance. So I guess those are two different questions, but vehicle performance as well as looking at how to kind of get the technicians and operations folks on board with the transition.
I was told by our deputy director of facilities that they tried it on an old Ford yard tractor. And they said that tractor has never performed better with RD. They were so surprised and so happy to see that old engine running smoothly. Yeah, so I think I think it's a good product.
we've seen a lot of positivity. I think a big education piece was making sure people knew that renewable diesel is different than biodiesel because there was some challenge with biodiesel oxygenation versus the hydrogenated fuels, right? And that was a big education piece, and that's super critical to get the buy-in because a mechanic, their job is to make that vehicle run every single day. To say they like it, I think I can't say, oh, they like it way more. They're just like, oh, this operates great. My machine runs every day. That works good enough for me, right? Versus it's 5% more efficient. I think that's rough some numbers there because that higher cetane number tends to run, a vehicle a little better. But yeah, it's not this is the data behind it. It's more of like the feel from the mechanics.
Yeah, it's a few. And then after that, they asked to produce stickers that said renewable diesel. This vehicle runs on renewable diesel because they were so happy with it. So they started doing that.
And so snowplows, I think John and I probably get asked regularly, what are there electric snowplows? No, not yet. And certainly looking at Massport, where your goal is, full decarbonization, electrification. Now this is as a bridge fuel. What it just made me so excited to see those snowplows on the runway, presumably using renewable diesel. How did that run? Because that's probably a different duty cycle than some of your other vehicles.
Yeah, so for a long time, like we were not getting good snow, and they were not being able to test it. But I think when they ran the test, after that they said, they came back and said we're all in. So I wasn't there when they were, doing those snow runs, but they came back and told me we're all in after that. So.
Yeah, for our snowplows, we plow a provincial park road in British Columbia. It's about 20 miles and up to 8% grade, right? So and they're pushing some pretty dense snow, and the operators everything's working perfect. So like that is versus this machine's running better. I don't know if we've ever got to that point, but yeah, no issues at all. and they want to know one day if it was petroleum diesel in their truck versus renewable diesel. That's a good sign.
Yeah, and you know that clearing the runways is a big deal for us, right? We have to always have at least the primary runway available, and it's a huge deal. I mean, you saw the picture. There are videos you can look up of snow clearing for our airport and other cold weather airports as well. And that's like a critical, mission critical, safety critical, operation. So if they can accept renewable diesel, then I think that's a really good stamp of approval.
No, I agree. And I think, not looking for, the mechanics, technicians, and the operators say, this is great. Sometimes good enough is absolutely perfect. So just hearing that there aren't negative comments or, no comments is also really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been really great, and sort of in the vein of logistic challenges. Peggy and I have been talking to a lot of folks in the Northeast specifically that are, either considering renewable diesel, have piloted it already, or have, full on used it. And we have talked to someone recently, I won't name who it was, but somebody that had sort of used renewable diesel and then due to supply challenges had to stop using renewable diesel. So I think, Tom, you had mentioned this. The benefit of renewable diesel is that since it's chemically identical to petroleum diesel, you can always just go back. But just hoping you both can talk to a little bit more of the supply logistics that you have to work through, and how you sort of manage that relationship to ensure that each fleet and stuff has the supply sufficient to operate at the appropriate levels.
I'll speak to our Northeast resorts, right? We went down this path last year, and having a dollar premium is on one thing, right? But a lot of the resorts get deliveries twice a week, right? So like you got to make sure you're getting a delivery twice a week when we're cranking. And so like were the teams comfortable about a supply that was 6 hours away or more? They weren't necessarily, right? Like that's just, and I'm not going to push something if you have a resort buy-in, operator buy-in, that's when it's successful. And so like that was a pinch point for us. Like, do we rely on something 6 hours away? Like, will it come this week? And like I said, their job is to, it's similar to Shalish's the snow plowers. Their job is to plow that snow, and if that fuel works, perfect. We have it every day, perfect, right? But as soon as you compromise someone's job, that's a big issue. So I think that's being comfortable with our supply. We've had to switching haulers, right? When a resort's comfortable with a hauler for the last 15 years, and you say, "Hey, we're going to give you a new hauler," they're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Who decided? So that's logistics of getting people comfortable with the supply if it's available.
Yeah, and I will tell you that was always a big question. Is there enough supply, right? And when I talked to Broco, because they were already supplying us regular diesel, petroleum diesel, and we were using the same contract to switch to renewable diesel. And after January, there were some uncertainties, and it took time for them to come back and say, yes, we can deliver 500,000 gallons for the next 6 months. But they came back and said, yes, we can do that. And they quoted a price for that, volume. And then we decided to go ahead. But there's still like one area of our operation which is using snow melters, not the snow plows. When there's heavy snow and it snows throughout the day, those snow melters, we have about 17 of them. They run on a continuous basis, and they get supplied in a way that they need to be resupplied every so many hours. And there is still one of the operators who, one of the facilities operator who is responsible for the snow melter is still wary of not being able to get the supply of renewable diesel during the snow event. So the way we have worked this out is one, we asked Brocco to guarantee that they can do that, right? That they can refuel quickly. And maybe they'll, depending on the situation, they could provide extra tankers on site. There used to be, they were able to get regular diesel from Irving tank farm, fuel farm nearby. But that since has, I think, gone away. So there's still a concern about during heavy snow, will you be able to supply that steady volume of renewable diesel or not? And then the other option is if they cannot supply renewable diesel, then we will switch to petroleum diesel for that snow event. Uh, you know, so that's how we've sort of worked out, and it's a good thing that you can switch back and forth without impacting your operation. So that's one of the other good thing about this is you can switch back and forth. So, but there is still a concern about having a supply when you need it, like especially during heavy snow and persistent snow events.
Okay, that's good to hear. So the concern, I think, for both of you and anyone with that mission critical is really having your fuel available
Yeah,
and just fuel, specifically renewable diesel. But if not, because
Yeah.
it is a drop-in, then you can add the petroleum one. So that eases some anxieties.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And like
Right.
Steve mentioned, if everybody pulls together and creates that demand, the supply will be there.
That's
Is
what
what I
I'm
feel,
hoping for.
right?
Yeah. Now we also need the thermal sector. Okay. Any other questions? I don't see any in the chat, Lorelai. Any hands up? Nope. All right. So I'd like to thank Shalish and also Tom for presenting. John is going to take us home with some key takeaways, next steps, and the next two webinars. John, thanks everybody.
Great. Thank you. And so one thing that we wanted to share today as we're wrapping up is a working group session that is happening by our colleagues in Yellowstone, Teton, Clean Cities, which Tom has mentioned. And I also dropped an infographic in the chat showcasing some of those maintenance savings that they were talking about earlier. So our colleague Jesse has been coordinating this group for, I think, over a year, maybe a year and a half or 2 years now. So a lot of great work has been happening out west. That was sort of the inception for the idea of running a similar working group session in the Northeast out here, which, as we can already see, there's been a lot of great resource sharing and connections being made to continue the conversation around what really needs to happen to move the needle with renewable diesel in our neck of the woods. So I wanted to talk through some of the key takeaways that came up today. Obviously, there were a lot of really good pieces that were shared, and there's a lot to capture here, and really appreciate everybody for sharing some input and asking those questions that are going to be used to help inform future conversations. But one of the things that was really identified was renewable diesel can be a great bridge fuel for electrification. There are a lot of use cases where electrification works, and there are those immediate emission savings. But as we know, in the off-road and the heavy-duty sector, electrification can still be quite challenging due to the duty cycles, due to the costs, and infrastructure required to support those vehicles. So renewable diesel is a great alternative for those vehicles without making any modifications to the vehicles themselves. One thing that we also heard was that the Northeast needs some sort of like anchor volume to increase availability. There needs to be enough demand to drive supply, and not the other way around. Like Stephen had mentioned, it's not having the supply first and then folks will come, but really ensuring that collectively we can get that demand here. Another thing is that renewable diesel has been successfully deployed in snowy climates in the Northeast, and out west up to R100. Of course, it may involve some blending, so doing something that Tom had mentioned between an R50 and R100. But it is possible. And another thing that came up was around price premiums. So, there have been price premiums initially, up to $1. But as demands or blends are shifting, those price premiums can also shift. And so that delta between petroleum diesel and renewable diesel continues to shrink. There's this, I think one thing that we heard was conversations are essential to have, talking to a variety of fuel suppliers and haulers potentially to make sure that you can get adequate supply and blends that are needed for your fleet's needs and, the operational for the fleets geographically. And then another quick reminder is when we're talking about renewable diesel emissions, what we're really talking about is the life cycle emissions and reporting. So looking at the carbon intensity over the entirety of the fuel, looking at the production, sourcing, transportation, all the way to the fleet end use. So those are the key takeaways today. This has been a really, really impactful second working group session. We're really looking forward to our next two sessions. As a reminder, our next session will be focused on policy, and our next session will be in 3 months. So looking at November, I believe November 5th, again at the same time from noon to 1:30. So we'll send out a recording and we'll make the slide decks available, a PDF copy of them as well. And we'll include the contact information for both of our presenters today who shared a ton of really great information, and I'm sure would be more than willing to connect one-on-one if there's any questions that folks would like to talk through. This was outdated. That's our session today. But this is our contact information. We'll drop that in the chat. So for folks that want to reach out directly to myself or Peggy, we are here for you to answer questions, to make those connections, and sort of help guide fleets through this process. So
John, just one quick little commercial. Abby Swain reminded us from the EPA. There's also the Clean Air Northeast 2025 Partners Meeting in Cambridge in September 25th and 26th. And John and I were just asked to participate and speak on renewable diesel. So details are still emerging for us as to what day we're going to be there. But also another great event talking about clean air in the Northeast and how alternative fuels can help support this mission.
Awesome.
And thanks,
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, really appreciate everybody's participation and looking forward to reconnecting in November or at that event in September.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it.